Yeah, we're just here to talk to you guys about marketing communications, social media, PR, and sort of driving relevance and maintaining relevance in the digital age, as well as what it means to protect and uphold the reputation. I'm Jake. I founded the company 3 years ago, 96NX. We're an integrated public relations firm and marketing agency. And we work with clients ranging from corporate law firms, political entities. We're branching into the entertainment space. We're kind of all over the place when it comes to our clientele roster, but our focus is definitely on the digital sphere, diversity and inclusion, as well as young audiences between 18 and 30, because that's kind of our lane. But I'll let Kenyatta introduce himself and talk a little bit about his background.
So I think we maybe should have gotten a slightly bigger room. But this is really exciting, though. It feels great to know that people are really interested in understanding the shift towards digital and seeing kind of what it means for business. Because I think at the end of the day, everyone understands what social media means for them as a person, right? Like, okay, I can check in with my cousin who lives far away. I can reconnect with this person in high school. I can creep on my exes on Instagram, whatever it is people want to do. We all understand that to a certain level. So my background, right, is I started off actually in the NGO world. And I realized very quickly that social media was one of the best tools for advertising, especially at the time Twitter. And I worked internationally. So Twitter was by far the best way to get around blocks, get around governments, report directly about what's happening. And then I moved into the content creation space where I learned about how to actually make the visuals that make people react on social media. And I think that that's a really interesting thing, right? Because there was a point where the internet was all words, where it was forums, where it was short messages, where it was all these different things happening, even early Facebook, where it was mostly about text. It was mostly about funny messages or engaging things or what people are up to. And now we're making this transition to the point where the internet is mostly visual. And that, I think, has been a really difficult point for businesses because businesses aren't designed to create visual content on a really regular basis. It's not something that businesses in general have had to do. So most businesses I find are struggling because they're like, what do we look like? It's one thing to say, okay, this is what we sound like, this is what we say, this is what we talk about. But what does an Instagram story look like for an engineering firm? Like that's a very different conversation to have, right? So some businesses like cupcake shops have taken over the world through Instagram because they understand how to make those visuals work for them. Accountants, not so much, right? So how do we make this shift and how do we make it accessible for everyone is a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, as well as what is social media, what is the internet, and what does it mean to be relevant on this space, right? Because everybody will say, oh, social media, and then immediately what I hear after that is Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn, right? But these aren't the only things that are social media, and these aren't the only ways that social media interacts with us on a daily life. For example, if you watch an hour of CNN, I guarantee that they're going to pull tweets about conversations into CNN, and that's going to drive the conversation that they're having around news. So what does it mean to be on the internet or on social media or on Twitter in a world where the news is on Twitter and the news gets their news from Twitter? It really changes the way that we interact with all these different platforms. It means that you don't have to necessarily be using a platform or talking on a platform for what's happening on that platform to affect you. And sometimes the best preparation isn't to use it itself, but to understand how it can come back to maybe haunt you or support you later on.
And just with a show of hands, how many people are actively using social media channels? Okay. Also, so pretty much most people. Are we using Instagram? How many people are using Instagram? Okay, so yeah, so quite most people, and then obviously probably everybody uses LinkedIn, right? Okay, so yeah, everybody's on social. The thing is, a lot of people sort of don't understand that the internet has become synonymous with social media. I mean, social media is not just it's not just channels like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's essentially the internet at large because we've moved into this world of instant news. There's a 24-hour news cycle. Information and opinions spread faster than they ever have before. Back 20 years ago, companies in crisis would have to release statements through the New York Times or through television media. But today, we live in a world of rapid response where everything is sort of predicated on being quick enough to react to conversations on Twitter, especially, Facebook, LinkedIn, the general social space. And we want to talk about some of the things we have on our slides, but it seems like this is not. Okay.
And we might just skip that. So I want to start off with a story. I think that's going to put some of this stuff in perspective, right, in terms of what it means to be out of date or up to date. So I want everyone, I'm sure most of the people here have probably been in a business situation where you get a call from a salesperson, right? There's someone on the phone trying to sell you something or get you to engage with something. So I want you to imagine you're on this call. Someone just gave you a call and they're talking about a product that's going to save you a ton of time and energy. And at first you're like, I don't really want to talk to you. But after a minute, you're like, you know what? What you're talking about is actually pretty interesting and I could see how we could use that. You're a couple minutes in, they're talking to you about some of the benefits. They're talking to you about some of the things that your competitors have done with this same product that they sell, and it's all worked really well. And you're like, oh, I actually remember Johnny was talking about that at the last meeting for this thing or that thing. They're talking about all these things, and you're like, wow, this actually sounds really interesting. So you come around and you go, what's my next step? What do I need to do to get signed up? How do we move forward? And they say, give me your fax number. I'm going to fax you over some paperwork and fax it back to me, and then we'll get started from there. Immediately you go from, oh man, this is so great, this is so easy, let me get started with this thing, to, are you even a real company? Do I need to check your website? Is faxing really the best way to do this? Do I even have a fax machine? How much effort am I going to have to put into getting you this information now? Shoot, what is the fax number? It's not on my business card anymore. Where does the fax number even go? Is that Susan in charge of the fax? Is Susan even in today? Like, you're going to immediately start to go through this rabbit hole of like, I don't even know how much I want this anymore. And this is the danger of not being up to date, right? When you don't touch people and contact people and communicate with people where they are, when you start to do things that are out of date, what you're doing is you're throwing up roadblocks in between the thing that people want to engage with around you and what they're trying to do. And you also start to introduce into their mind the idea that because you're not up to date, you might not actually be that good at what you're doing, or you might not be legitimate, right? If you're working with a bank that doesn't have an app, not only are you thinking to yourself, this is going to be less convenient for me because they don't have an app, but you're also thinking to yourself, if there's a data breach, is this bank advanced enough to protect my information, right? It starts to make you think to yourself, maybe these people aren't ready yet. Maybe they're not up to date. And to a certain extent, this is what happens when businesses aren't on social media or when their social media is not good, right? When you see a business that has a great website, you're like, yes, awesome. And then you look them up on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, and they're just not there. A lot of times what goes through your mind next is like, okay, well, if they're not here, how good are they? Their competitors are all here. Why don't they have a team? Do they not have marketing staff? Are they smaller than I think they are? Why haven't they done these things? Why is it that these things that, for me, seem very basic, for me, I'm used to businesses reacting to me or engaging with me in this platform, why aren't they here yet? And that starts to introduce other doubts. And that's what it means to be behind or to not be up to date. So you can imagine from your perspective as a business, sometimes something becomes really overwhelming and you think to yourself, oh, I don't want to do this, or I don't want to be here, or I don't know how much effort I need to put into this. But the problem with that is you might get into the point of introducing to your clients the idea that you're actually not as advanced of a company as you say you are. And sometimes that can cause problems where they're looking at you and they're thinking to themselves, well, maybe I should go with the competitor that has this thing already, because I know that they at least have put in the effort to be in this place. And Jake's going to go into some of the different things about social media that really have to do with how social media manages reputation. Because sometimes things are going to happen with your company that you're not aware of, especially if you're not on social media and a part of those conversations.
So a big thing that a lot of people seem to confuse with social is that everybody in the marketing communications conversation thinks that social is a great way to sell, right? So when we think about why we want to use social and why an organization wants to be present on social media, a lot of times the conversation sits around sales, right? Is this giving me an immediate ROI? Am I getting my money back if I'm spending ad spend? Are the staff that I'm hiring worth it? Why would we put time here as opposed to time in print or Google AdWords or whatever other tactic you wanna consider? The thing to understand about social media in general and in the social web is that social media is a channel, it's not a tactic. So in a sense, we need to know the difference between a strategy and a channel, because social media is where the attention lies. People are on the internet. Everybody's glued to their phone. People are on their computers. So at the end of the day, your audience is present on these channels, but that doesn't mean that just being present is enough to have a tangible outcome that you're looking for. So when you're developing a strategy for your company or your organization, your personal brand, your personality, whatever it may be, it's important to understand what objective you're looking for. Because social media as a channel needs to be leveraged for different reasons. Whether that means you want to build reputation, you want to build a brand community, you want to cultivate an audience, you want to sell a product or a service. At the end of the day, it's important to understand what your objective is when building a strategy, because being there is just not enough. It's just like saying, our name is in the news, but why? Just if somebody mentions you doesn't mean that they're going to take an action. It doesn't mean that they're looking at you as a credible thought leader. It doesn't mean that they think that you're any better than the competition. It doesn't mean that they're going to buy your product or service. So it's important to understand that you need to develop an objective attached to your strategy and not just be present. So with that, it's important to define that first, and then you can move forward in creating a plan of action, a strategy, et cetera, and then execute. It's good? Okay. Well, we'll get this thing up, but then we'll talk a little bit more about reputation. But let me just start on reputation. How many people have seen a PR disaster on social media? Yeah, one. How many people have been involved in a PR disaster? Yeah, okay. All right, so let me just go through this real quick since we have our slides. And this is really just meant to guide us through everything. I'll just go over here. Channel, not a tactic. Okay. So you want to backtrack on audience? No, just move forward. So, reputation. So one thing that makes social media unique, and a thing that's really changed our media landscape, is the fact that everything is instantaneous. So in the past, when you're looking at managing reputations, there was always sort of a buffer time between when an issue happened and when news would go out and spread. So say, for example, 15 years ago, an executive scandal happened in an oil company, or there was an oil spill. Information spreads within maybe 3-4 hours of understanding what happened. News goes live, there's coverage. At this point, the conversation is still relatively stagnant. People are understanding what's happening. They know that there's an issue. They know that the company has made a mistake. But at the same time, people aren't able to go out and spread mass amounts of information without being present on traditional news channels. Today, that's not the case. If something goes wrong, you get a firestorm on Twitter. People can post about it on their blog, Instagram stories. Everybody could quickly speak about what's going on. So if anybody remembers the Papa John's controversy with the racial issue, something like that spreads like this. I'm sure everybody's familiar with Starbucks, what happened in Starbucks here in Philadelphia. Where in the past we'd get, yeah, that wasn't long ago. Where in the past, this would go through an entire news cycle, where today the virality is instantaneous. So it's really important to have a plan of action and understanding both sides of the sword with social media, because number one, virality can be fantastic. If you create content and a story or a marketing campaign that people want to share, it could build a lot of brand equity very quickly. But the other side of that is, you get in crisis like Starbucks or Papa John's, that reputational backlash is instantaneous. And never underestimate the power of a Twitter conversation. Twitter has destroyed people's political careers. It's destroyed entertainment careers. It's impacted the bottom line of business. And while this might be concerning as a business owner, it pushes for transparency. So for the consumer, it's almost better because they're able to share opinions and information and create a more transparent business landscape. But that means that your communication plan needs to be very clearly defined when using social. That means having a reputation management plan in place with the social media guidelines within your organization or your personal brand. It means being prepared to handle an issue or a crisis before it occurs. And it means having a plan of action to handle that issue or crisis when it occurs. Because at the end of the day, if you're in a company with multiple people, somebody's going to post something stupid online. Somebody's going to share the wrong thing. Somebody is going to be commenting on something that they shouldn't be commenting on, and your company's brand or reputation is going to be attached to that comment. So it's important to be prepared to deal with those things in a way that is guarded and helps you maintain your company's reputation or your personal reputation. I don't mean to make it sound scary or dire, but at the end of the day, it's really just about being conscientious and smart about what you put on online, because as my parents or grandparents have always said, once you post it, it doesn't go away, which is kind of true. So with that, I'd like Kenyatta, and we're going to both speak a little bit about how reputation plays into diversity and inclusion as well in today's digital media landscape, especially with the social first world, and how, in my opinion, the most dire issues that exist in a social space are issues related to diversity and inclusion, which generally hurt companies the worst.
Yeah. And one thing that I will add to this before we go into diversity and inclusion, which touches on it, but I think frames the conversation in general on social, is that when something happens on social media, it's always part of an existing conversation, right? If something happens that's political, it's part of an existing political conversation. You've already got party lines drawn. You've already got people that think this group is this group is that. You've already got people that are for or against certain things, right? So it doesn't happen in a vacuum. If something happens where there's an Exxon oil spill, people aren't going to take it as Exxon in this one time, an oil spill in this one situation, right? You've already got people that are environmentalists that have been against this certain type of deep ocean drilling that are going to jump on it from this perspective, and they're going to bring up old Exxon oil spills. They're going to bring up this thing and that thing. And then you've already got people that are going to be pro-business that are going to say, listen, this is part of the business, and Exxon is paying the cost, and this is what it is. But everything fits into a larger narrative, especially when it comes to social media. So you have to think about the narratives that your company plays into. And I think that this is where a lot of the damage comes when it comes to diversity and inclusion, right? So you might have a company that is, like, this is something I see a lot in the political space, where you might have a candidate that posts something and they say, listen, our cabinet is 60%, 70% women. And then people of color look at it and say, but it's all white. And as soon as that happens, it's going to play into the narrative about, okay, where are you? Okay, you represent a relatively diverse district. Why is it that your advisors are all white? You've had complaints about police brutality in your district that you haven't done anything about. Well, it makes sense if your advisor, and then it's going to roll and roll and roll. So when you think about something that you're doing, you want to make sure that you understand the existing conversations, and you also want to put it in the place of those existing conversations, right? So when you're doing something and you're saying we're diversifying our board, but you want to celebrate the success, but you also know that you're not there yet, you want to make that clear. Because a post that goes up that says, we're in the process of diversifying, here's our goal and here's our progress so far, is very different than saying, look at how great we are, right? Because when you say, look at how great we are, people are looking for reasons why you're not that great. But when you say, this is our plan and this is how we're moving, people are going to look for ways to support you. So you have to consider what social media conversations and reactions you're going to get based on where you're saying you are on this post, right? And another really important thing to consider is that chances are, especially if you're based in Philadelphia, you've got people of color, you've got LGBTQ people, you've got women, you've got immigrants, especially recent immigrants, or whatever, that are part of your community who can give you feedback. But you also have to be really open to that feedback, right? Because like people of color aren't gonna tell you things that are gonna piss you off when you're their boss, and they need that job. So you have to consider before you put something on social media, like, am I getting honest feedback about how good this content is or what the real risks are with this content? Because what's gonna happen a lot is that the person that's maybe in the position to be able to notice, hey, this might not be the best thing, might also be the person that's most vulnerable to being punished for speaking out about it. And in that case, you're going to get a lot of women that are gonna say, hey, this might not be the best way to go about your Women's History Month post, but then they're gonna go, but do I really wanna antagonize this boss that is always talking about how, oh, you know, we've gotta change this and change that and whatever else? No, I don't. I'm gonna be quiet. And then that goes up, and now you're looking around saying, well, why didn't anyone tell me? Well, that's a company culture thing, right? But it's gonna play out on social media. That's where you're gonna hit the reputational damage. That's where you're gonna feel the negative aspects of that. And the same thing is true for positive, right? You've got a lot of companies that are seeing huge upsides because they're realizing that they appeal to an audience that they didn't know they appealed to before. I think that this is happening a lot in recruiting, where a company will share a story of a young person of color, LGBTQ person, or a young woman who is working with the company and doing amazing things, or a mom that returned to work with this company that gave her a chance after she had been out of the workforce for a long time. And suddenly they've got all of these amazing candidates coming to them saying, hey, I heard the story about XYZ, and this seems like a great place for me as well. And now your recruiting pipeline is full because you've got all of this talent that heard about this amazing story. So there's positive aspects of it too. But when you go out of your way to share these stories positively on social media, you might find that you are appealing to people that you never thought that you would appeal to before. Or you might find that you have clients in places that you never thought you'd have clients before, because this thing actually fits in really well with this particular situation that you didn't expect.
And another thing to really keep in mind with today's digital media landscape and with social is that relevance is pretty much equivalent to authenticity. So you see a lot of brands that go out and try and create messages and communications plans that are just not truly authentic to their identity. We've even been approached by large companies that want communications plans or campaigns that align them with this set of ideologies that don't necessarily align with their actions. Social and the internet and how quickly news and opinions and information spread will not allow that. You can't go out and say something when you're not that something. So in a sense, with today's media landscape, our job as an agency and in PR is as much management consulting as it is communications, because there's certain aspects of a company that need to shift if you're going to go out and say that you're a diverse company. If you want to attract diverse talent, have diverse customers, work with diverse clients. It's not enough to just say it, right? Because you're going to get called out. It's going to shine through as inauthentic. So in a sense, it's really important to stand behind the values that you communicate. It's not enough to just say something. Actions are always louder than words, as they say, right? So an example of a company that just really misstepped in the sense of diversity and inclusion in trying to be relevant with news was Pepsi. I don't know if anybody remembers the Kendall Jenner Pepsi commercial where they basically had a police riot where Kendall Jenner went out and she handed out Pepsi cans to the police officers. It was very similar to the Baltimore riots. That just didn't go very well because a can of Pepsi doesn't really solve police brutality. Obviously trying to piggyback off of something like that, like as Pepsi, is just wasn't helpful to their brand, and at the end of the day, it was extremely damaging to their reputation. And data showed us that trust in Pepsi has declined a lot as a brand in terms of authenticity. Millennials are more likely to buy a Coke than a Pepsi after this issue. Surveys show us that the reputational damage that occurred from this one ad has just continued to hurt the reputation and bottom line of the company. And the thing is, how was this not caught? Like, who thought that this was okay, right? Like which executive said, this is a good idea. Let's piggyback off of police brutality and race riots and promote our product. Like it's just unbelievable. You put something out like this and the backlash is just immediate, right? And the thing is, it can't go away. Like you could find this ad, you know, the conversation still exists. People are always going to say, remember Pepsi did this? So it sort of borders on that line of, you know, anything you put out there is going to stay out there. So be careful and then be authentic, right? Like if Pepsi really wanted to show that they were racially conscious and cared about political issues, what they could have done is implemented a program to ensure that diversity was reflected in their staff, and then communicated on that, shared people's stories. But instead, they sort of piggybacked off of an extremely sensitive issue that did nothing but hurt their reputation. And there's other companies that do it. Gucci's guilty. Gucci recently did something that was just unbelievable with a sweater design that went extremely viral on social media. Papa John's, of course, which was just like blatantly racist. So it's just important to be authentic with your values, and then also understand that it's not enough to just say you have values. It's important to act upon them. So
yeah, because people will find out. And I think on the flip side, right, like Nike did a really good job with this, with their Colin Kaepernick endorsement. Nike has always been a company built off of the reputation and the cool factor of black athletes. Like that's who they are, right? Like there's a reason why Jordans are Jordans. And when Nike went in, a lot of people said, oh, well, there's going to be backlash. It's going to be really negative. Nike's going to lose business. People aren't going to buy Nike anymore. But across the board, we've seen profits rise for Nike because their audience is the audience that is also supporting black athletes in protest. So when you do it authentically, even if there's a lot of backlash, and even if that backlash seems negative, it might not actually be negative, right? It's about being authentic, it's about understanding your audience, and it's about going out and making the right move for who your brand is.
And to piggyback off of what Kenyatta said, do bring personality, and in some instances, political opinions are okay as a brand, as long as you understand your audience. That's another big shift. You know, years ago, you know, it was inappropriate for brands to have political stances and stand for political issues, sort of be a part of the larger conversation that's happening politically. Today, another part of relevance is just being a part of that conversation, right? So social media has almost personified brands and organizations and companies. A brand is no longer a distant entity that can't be reached. You know, it's not just this corporation and logo. It's a living, breathing person almost, in a sense, because you know, if I don't like American Airlines and I'm unhappy with my service, I could tweet at them and have a conversation, maybe. You know, American Airlines is not the most responsive, but you know, you have other companies and you're able to have that dialogue. These brands are able to communicate with you. So when you have the personification of brand entities, it's almost expected that they carry opinions, because having no opinion is like having the wrong opinion, right? It's like the bystander effect. You know, if something wrong is happening and you just stand there, what does that say about you? So with careful guidance and smart strategy, it is appropriate to have opinions on issues as a corporation, which is something that is a massive shift in the communications landscape that we haven't seen until recently, and that's all because of social media. It's a part of relevance. It's a part of becoming almost a personified entity as an organization, and that's because of the media landscape that we live in today.
What's your sense of the sneakers and the Betsy Ross pullback? Where's that going to net out for them?
Positively.
Any thought?
Yeah, absolutely. Because Nike understands their audience, and I guarantee you there's not a bunch of people that love LeBron hanging out in North Philly that care about Betsy Ross flag. It's just not a thing, right? And then black academics are going to look at that and be like, yeah, slavery, not cool. So it's not something that's super exciting for their base or for their main community in terms of like thought leadership content. So the people that would appeal to aren't the people that are going to be going out there rocking Nikes all the time anyway.
Cool. Yeah. And we're going to actually open up for questions in a minute. But just as some closing points, since we had a little bit of a rough start with this, I apologize. Just some key things to take away from the social web and relevance and being a relevant company or organization or brand in 2019. understand that social media is a channel and not a tactic, right? You need to have a tactic attached to the use of communications channels like social media. It should play a role in your communications and your marketing plan. You need to know what your goals and objectives are, right? But within that, it's always important to add value. You need to understand why people are on social media in the first place if you're going to be able to leverage it effectively for your organization or your brand. People aren't there to look at your mattress sale. They don't care. Right? People don't care that you have 5% off your product or that you have a sale for Labor Day. It's not important. So if you want to be relevant and to capture attention and be a part of the conversation, you need to join the conversation. People are on social media to consume news, to be a part of a conversation, to engage with their friends and family and brands that they admire. They're there to laugh and to be entertained. So understanding why people use social in the first place is critical for you to be being able to leverage it for a communications and a marketing channel. You know, make people laugh, join the conversation, engage with your audience. These are all important factors in developing an effective social media strategy. And then, you know, value diversity and inclusion as an organization, just from a management consulting approach, value it. Because if you're not conscious of the shift in transparency, you're going to pay for it on your bottom line because people care. You know, it's not okay to just have 100% white male leadership today. It's not. Like whether you like the opinion or not, it's not okay. And people will be able to see it. You know, if you're a larger corporation, you're going to be called out for it. You're going to alienate a large group of stakeholders.
You're not going to recruit the best talent?
You're not. Because it's 2019 and things are different because of this. So authenticity and being a conscientious organization is just as important as knowing how to send out a tweet. You know, it goes beyond just knowing how to send out a tweet. In a sense, our digital media landscape has not only created this amazing channel for us to share messages and stories and build audiences and create brand loyalty. It's almost held us accountable for being more responsible business people and more responsible brands. You know, our values are laid out in front of us. You know, the world is forgiving. You know, if making change is going to be applauded, but not making change or regressing is going to be punished. So in a sense, authenticity is really at the core of all of this. And then from there, you know, it's just all about being there and being present and continuously learning and adapting to a changing environment that everybody is still learning and adapting to. So just because you don't have a Twitter right now, it doesn't mean that you're way, way, way behind. It just means, you know, learn what today's communications world means. And we can't teach you that in 30 minutes, right? But we can tell you that authenticity matters, diversity and inclusion matters, providing value and not just being a sales channel matters, right? Because people want value. They're not there to just listen to what you have to sell. You know, what I think there's a statistic that says something about even sales in general is that, you know, most people don't make a sale until the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th touch point. It's like the same thing, right? Like if you're helping people as an accounting firm or an engineering firm and saying, you know, do this instead, and hey, like, you know, if you approach things this way, people begin to develop trust, and you're looked at as somebody who could be helpful, and then eventually at the point of sale, you're the first person that comes to mind. All these things are crucially important, and it really all just boils down to, you know, everything is laid out in front of us because of how quickly news, opinions, and information spread today. So with that, let's have a discussion. We wanted to dedicate most of our time to just having an open dialogue with everybody about their questions, because this is such a massive topic, and it's really difficult to just kind of digest all of it in a little tiny PowerPoint. So without further ado, who would like to sort of bring up the first topic of discussion or question or concern? Eric.
Yeah, so, I know these guys, so just in a conversation that we had at one point in my office, Kenyatta, you brought up something very important that kind of changed the way I think about things, and I want to see if the audience can benefit from this. You made it very clear that all content is not usable for social media. And you know how we do our blogs and we just kind of blast them out, and you're like, Eric, blogs may not necessarily be the best content for social media. So for the benefit of everybody here, if you can talk a little bit about the types of content that are stars on social media and the kind that are just going to sink like an anchor.
Well, and I think that one of the problems that people have is that they want to choose their social media content based on topic instead of based on format, right? Like social media is a format heavy space. So if the topic, because I know you guys are in accounting, right? So just to pick on you, if the topic is how to prepare for your 2020 tax returns when you work full-time and have a side gig, right? This is something that people might be thinking to themselves like, okay, I don't know how to do this. There's a lot of people that are gonna work part-time or have a company on the side or drive Uber or spoke for a while and got paid honorariums and they don't know how to deal with this. On your website, that could be a really great blog post. On Facebook or LinkedIn, maybe you share that blog post or maybe you make a post directly for Facebook or LinkedIn that shares some key points from the blog post, talks about like 3 top things people need to think about and then has a link back to your blog post for people that really want more information. Or maybe you turn that into a short video that explains some of the things that are in your article with a link back to your blog post. On Instagram, that needs to be either like a picture infographic or it needs to be a series of like text pieces that people can swipe through with 3. And in your caption, it needs to be very clear how much people are swiping through, what they're gonna get out of it, as well as where they can learn more information. And remember, you can't add a specific link to that particular Instagram post, which means that you're gonna need an overall link back to your Instagram page on your, link back to your blog post on your Instagram page. Or you could put in an Instagram story and maybe have it as a series of short videos that link back to this blog post.
So really to just simplify, Kenyatta's excellent response is 2 words: channel specificity. The reality is that you can't just recycle content across all different channels. It goes back to the most, and I always say this, the most basic tenet of marketing and communications, which is understanding your audience. Where does your audience consume media? You should as an organization, a brand, you should understand who your audience is. You should understand their age, all of their data essentially about who's your prime audience, right? And then understand where they consume media, because if it's Pinterest, then it's going to be different than if it's on your website or if it's on YouTube or if it's on LinkedIn. And then you develop content around those platforms, because a 5-paragraph article is not going to perform on Twitter. But it might do well on your website if people are going there to consume media, or if your audience is in an older generation, maybe earned media and bylines and columns are the best way for you to connect with them, because maybe they're consuming media in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, or the Philadelphia Business Journal. So just understanding where that attention sits is crucial for developing effective content.
And I also say all the time when it comes to social media, like, be a straight up thief. Find who the industry leader is in your space and steal what they're doing. Like, who has the most followers on Instagram? What are they doing? Take your topics and do that same thing. It's probably going to work, because if it wasn't working, they wouldn't be still doing it. And if they have the most followers, the most engagement, the most whatever, just steal it. Like there's no, they can't sue you, right? Like, they can sue you if you steal their specific content, but if you steal their format and put your content, there's nothing they can do. And it's going to be way easier than testing and developing yourself. So if you have someone in your industry who's doing something amazing already, just take their stuff.
Other questions?
Do you have any recommendations for how to kind of organically transform relationships that might exist in other spheres, like a client or potential client that you have an email relationship with, a phone relationship with, and you want to kind of direct them into, let's say, Instagram, but in an organic way, not a follow me, follow back kind of thing. Is there any protocol or etiquette around that where you?
So why are you directing them onto Instagram?
I find that an authentic space to interact with people, professionally and personally.
So can you tell me a little bit more about like the business context for it, because that's going to shift it?
I'm in real estate.
Okay.
So there's like kind of a personal nature to
Gotcha.
business.
As well as, I imagine, the desire to share really high quality visuals and
Yeah.
keep people up to date very easily.
Yeah. So I find it an easy way to stay in touch with past clients, current clients, not about anything important, of course, but in kind of creating that brand.
So what I would do is have conversations about what they like and then just direct them to your Instagram post that has imagery of that, right? So if you know that this person is a huge fan of kitchens with 6-burner stoves, you'd be like, hey, I saw a kitchen the other day that was right up your alley. You know, I haven't spoken with you in a while, and I know that you're not in the market right now, but I saw a kitchen that made me think of you. Check out my Instagram post about it. And then if they're on it, it's really easy for them to follow you after that point, right? So that's the way I would engage. You already know what they're interested in. You already have an existing relationship. You're not pushing them to do anything specific. That could be a really comfortable way forward.
And it goes along with the same principle of it's always value added. Like with social, when you want to create an effective strategy, regardless of what your outcome is, you know, because it's just like any type of normal buying cycle, right? You have the consideration, evaluation, post-purchase. It's the same thing, right? But in the beginning of the funnel, value add is what's going to bring people in. So if you're in real estate, add value. You know, say, hey, check this out. You know, I did this and I think you'd like it. It's not weird to ask them to check out your Instagram. It's just like saying, hey, like I have a blog about granite countertops and you really like granite countertops. Check it out. Like it's stuff like that. So it's the same principle.
And I would also say too, if you're creating content like either ors or side-by-side comparisons or polls, you may also want to direct them to that, be like, hey, I really respect your opinion on living room spaces. And I created a poll about whether the open plan or this other type of plan is going to be the big thing in 2019. Would you mind commenting on it? Like that for me is a really smart way to do it, because sometimes to comment or engage with polls, people have to follow you depending on the platform. So it could be a way to push them into followership without ever saying like, I need you to follow me.
All right, next question. Anyone else want to add?
So I work for like a pretty small engineering firm. How is a method that we can bring personality to kind of the content we're putting out there? Because mainly we're trying to like educate customer base. We're not really talking about specific topics. We're talking more about what we do as a company. So how can we bring personality to that?
So what do you do as a company? 'Cause engineering
So
can be pretty broad.
we do DAS installs. So it's in-building cellular network solutions.
Gotcha.
So if you can't get cell service in this room, we would do a network so that you can get connection on your phone.
So I could see a ton of funny content about people being really frustrated about their cell phone service and like someone standing outside super cold in the rain trying to get in touch with people like, hi mom, how are you? And it's like, yeah, no one wants to pay $2,000 a month to live in a building where they can't talk on their phone. I would play off of that theme. And then for your audience, I would talk about, things that are valuable to them, like, places with great cell service, maybe. Do you have any data that says that people stay in those apartments longer? Do you have any data that says like why is this important? Why does this work out for them over time? I would put those numbers together and make really interesting little infographics and things like that to share directly with your clients, like, hey, there is proof that doing this is worth the investment because X, Y, Z. Because that's the question that they have in their mind. It's not like, will it work? They know it'll work. It's, is it worth it? Yeah. So if you can answer that question before you ever actually talk to them, then you're gonna be miles ahead.
And another thing is, so one really good point, creating funny and entertaining content. Again, like sort of how I touched on why people use social and why people are online in the first place. You want to piggyback off of that. You don't want to just do it, right? Because if you're just spamming out content that nobody wants to read, nobody's going to read it. I mean, I don't care about learning about your engineering stuff, but I would definitely watch a video that made me laugh, right? And then you sort of create that first impression, that first touch point that creates the awareness portion of the buying cycle. And then from there, you funnel down. But another thing is that it's kind of a bit of a tangent, but one thing that is so underrated in the space of public relations, right? Because that's my function, right? Kenyatta is advertising, he likes the data and everything, but I am definitely a hack when it comes to like PR and PR spin and reputation and crisis. That's what I do. The most underrated PR medium right now, I think, is Quora. Quora and Medium. Because everybody's so obsessed with media placements, right? Everybody cares about being in, a byline or getting covered by the news, but guess what? Half of the people never see it, they don't care, it doesn't matter. But when you answer people's questions, right? When somebody has a question, whether this is on LinkedIn, this is on Quora, this is on Medium, when you're able to engage with people and directly provide a source of value, it creates this immediate sort of sense of, oh, this person knows what they're talking about and they're willing to help me. I mean, if you have a very specific problem, I'd start answering questions on Quora. Build an audience by adding value through content that you write. Like, you already have this amazing platform where there's millions of eyeballs a day, right? Because that's more than what's in the business journal. It's just true, right? And people are going there for specific solutions. When you build a brand and a following on outlets like Medium and Quora, that's extremely valuable. Except it takes work, right? It's not just like a one-time thing. Like, you don't just get one article in the New York Times. Could that boost your sales or your credibility? Yeah, definitely. You know, I mean, I know somebody else in this room who has a small business, got an article in the Inquirer and got a huge hit in new business. But it's a one-time thing, right? It's transactional. But when you build a long-term community and consistently provide value, that's a PR strategy that's sustainable. So that could be another approach that would be extremely valuable.
So we work for a relatively new restaurant, and I think that maybe the struggle is trying to get more followers, right? I mean, I feel like a lot of restaurants are very similar, where you post pictures of food and, you know, the environment, and, you know, we're definitely just trying to grab more, and we're doing a lot of hashtagging and and you know, to be honest, I get kind of annoyed when I see everyone like hashtagging a whole bunch of things. So my question is there another way that we can grab new followers without hashtagging the world?
You want to take it? You want to take it?
talk about ads.
So I want to talk about influencers. So who wants to go first?
Go ahead.
All right, then I'll let you talk about ads. So he's going to talk about ads, and I'm going to talk about influencers.
Okay.
So it all goes back to creating community. Hashtags don't matter. Don't even. I mean, it's great, right? Like, you can get a boost in likes, but vanity metrics are useless. It doesn't matter. I'd rather have 30 likes from an engaged audience than 200 from hashtags, because they could be somewhere in like Frankfurt, Germany, and they saw your hashtag and like, oh, this is nice. Like, nobody cares. They're not going to buy from you. But develop community. So if you're a new restaurant, what I would do is I'd research what are the food influencers here in Philadelphia, assuming you're based in Philadelphia. You know, which people have audiences that are dedicated to seeing what type of food they eat. Who cares about what people are doing here in the city? What are the arts and cultures influencers in the city? Where do they eat? What do they do? Partner with them. Give them a free dinner, give them some money, do whatever it is that takes to get them involved and engaged with your content. Run a promotional campaign with an influencer that says, you know, oh, I just had this new restaurant, check it out. By the way, if you go in with my, you know, saying that, you know, my code helped you find them, you get a free lemonade or a free whatever. I don't know if you serve alcohol, or you get this or whatever. Create a community around that, and then have an integrated social plan that builds into the initial touch point, which would be that influencer awareness, right? So running promotional campaigns is actually extremely effective for brands like restaurants, right? Because it's a low ticket sale, you know, it doesn't take a lot to get somebody to come in and try a piece of chicken. You know, so at the end of the day, your goal should just be to get somebody to come in and like it, and then ask them to engage and to continue to engage with your content and share it. Run promotions, you know, things like that can be extremely effective. Hashtags and posting is not enough. You have a very saturated landscape where you need to actually provide some type of value. It's not enough to just have a pretty Instagram feed. And even if you do have a pretty Instagram feed, it doesn't mean people are going to be prompted to just come in. There needs to be some level of social shareability. There needs to be a reason why somebody's coming in. And then from there, you're able to build that community that starts to talk about your brand. Because, you know, we could sit here as an agency and tell you all day that the best marketing is running social ads or influencers. The best marketing is word of mouth. You just need to start getting that engine running. You know, at the end of the day, if your product sucks, it doesn't matter how great your marketing is. Right. So get people to come in the door, talk about how great your product is, and then from there you build a community and a brand that'll want to engage with your content because they're fans, they're not just customers. And then you sort of create this network that spiders out and brings in business organically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
I wanted to ask a couple questions.
Yeah.
What does where is your restaurant, first of all?
We're Spice Finch. We're over on 17th and Walnut.
Gotcha. So what are you known for?
I'm sorry?
What are you known for?
We have a fantastic lamb shank and our chili chicken kebabs. They're pretty popular.
Our happy hour is awesome.
Happy hour.
Overall,
Oh, we have
it's
really good
good
cocktails.
Gotcha. Okay. So
And we're in a hotel.
Yeah, oh yeah, we have a celebrity chef.
That's
Who's your chef?
Jen Carroll.
She was on Top Chef. She was on the
Okay.
finalist.
Cool.
okay. So you've got a lot to work with. I'm assuming you have lunch specials?
Yes, we do now.
Yes, we just opened for lunch like a week ago.
Gotcha.
So we're trying to.
So I would run ads against your lunch and your happy hour specials, letting people know what the specials are that day. You can run location-based ads, and you can make it, especially on Facebook and Instagram, and you can make it so that you target either people that work in a certain space or people that live in a certain space, depending on who you feel like your demographic is. I would also run ads that talk about things like Philadelphia's top 3 cocktails and put yourself as number 2, right? Like say, you know, this from Hobson Laundromat, us, and then these other people over here. Because that way you don't sound arrogant, but it feels believable for people that are like, oh, well, I've been to Hobson Laundromat, but I haven't been here. And like people want to be the friend that brings those other friends someplace new and interesting and then gets all the brownie points about how great their food knowledge is, right? So how can you play into that through your content, and how can you run really simple targeted ads that keep your costs down but create consideration? And how can you do it so that people are doing it at the right time? Because like on Facebook, I can run ads literally just from 10 o'clock to 11:30 every day. So if you have lunch specials that start at 11:30 and you know people are getting hungry at 10 and making the decision about where they're going to lunch, you can target people that work in Center City, Philadelphia, that are interested in these certain types of food or interested in cocktails or whatever, and you can target them with advertisements about how amazing your lunch specials are right before lunch. So that's the strategy that I would use, and I would limit to that to a couple dollars a day. Facebook ads. So I would use
Instagram.
Facebook and Facebook and Instagram are the same ads platform, but Facebook and Instagram, and I would use video-based ads and maybe some picture-based ads. I would A/B test it and see which one works best, but that's the strategy I would use in your case. Because all you need is eyeballs and a little bit more traffic.
So I have, I'm asking you, I think, more of your opinion and maybe proactive criticism or suggestions. I worked for Mercedes-Benz for about 7 years, and I started my LinkedIn in about 2012. So I had a lot of content that I could put on that, obviously, because the brand speaks for itself. And now I work for an IT firm, and we do marketing and technology. My clients are nonprofits, law firms, manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to think of a way to be fun, funny, engaged, to create a community around that, because IT can be really boring. People ask me what I do and they think, oh, it's new business development actually, but they think, oh, computers, IT, it's so vague and it's boring, and it's hard for me to talk about it because I don't do the actual IT portion. So I've been trying to do more volunteer things and post them on LinkedIn as getting involved with some of these companies or some of these nonprofit organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a pickleball instructor. So I've been saying, putting that out there. If you want me to come visit, or if you want my volunteer golden retriever, my therapy dog.
So I'm going to approach this from a PR perspective, and you could take something different. But number one, you're in an extremely competitive space that's not relatively exciting. I personally don't think anyone cares that you volunteer. I think maybe some people think it's nice. I don't think it's going to have an ROI on why people choose to work with you. In terms of creating content, however, I challenge you to think, how can you genuinely be different? A lot of people volunteer. And I'm not saying, like, please volunteer. Like, I like to volunteer too. Volunteering is fantastic. It's something you should do. But how can you genuinely be different so that people think, oh, that's that lady that is in IT. What is it that you can bring to the table in a consistent, recurring basis in terms of content marketing that makes you memorable, and is also authentic to you and your personality, right? Because in a place like IT where there's not a lot of differentiation, I think the most important thing to do is to differentiate yourself as a brand. You could do that on a brand scale. You could do that on an individual scale. As an internal stakeholder of the company that can drive your value as a staff member, because without you, they don't have this brand that's bringing in business. What you could bring to the table for the company. I mean, if I were in your shoes, I would do it for me so that I can be like, hey, like I brought this in, like pay me more, give me this, that, whatever. But the point is, I would think about how to differentiate yourself. And I can't tell you right off the top of my head how you should do that because I don't know you as a person. I mean, just the reason why I'm so blunt in saying that volunteering and stuff is not going to help is because a lot of people take these vanilla approaches and think that it's going to differentiate them. But when you read a blog post online that says, how do I be engaged on social? It's like, volunteer, get involved. Like, it's the same thing that like everybody else thinks they're going to do. But when you get a little bit more creative and bold with your approach, then it makes you a little bit more memorable. There's people that do crazy things that stand out and become memorable, and it's just about repetition and consistency. That's how I would do it from a personal branding perspective. There's a lot of ways you can go about it. Like, there's no single method or medium that is specifically the right answer for you. You just need to see how your audience responds and what works. And I think in order to do that, you need to look inside yourself. I mean, what personality characteristics do you have that stand out that you could build upon? I think that's a really cool thing because everybody has something really unique and interesting about themselves that they can extrapolate on that makes them exciting.
That's what I did for Mercedes in a way. It was personal branding.
Yeah.
So I was the Mercedes lady.
I'd buy a Mercedes off you. Yeah.
I did blogs and did all that.
Yeah.
So I really built my book. And that did work extremely well.
Yeah.
And hence I'm in IT and
Now you're like, how do I?
I've only been there for about 5 months, so it's
Yeah.
it's
a new thing.
Not as exciting sometimes.
So how do you bring luxury? I was gonna say, how do you bring luxury to IT?
Yeah. Why do people buy your product?
It's a luxury brand. It's very well known.
You mean Mercedes?
Yes.
Well, I mean, in IT, like your IT product. Why do organizations purchase it?
Some of it is brand reputation. The company's been around for 21 years.
None of it is that. Nobody buys
Well,
something
they
like.
like the person that they're dealing with.
But what does it do for the organization? Like, how can they justify to their boss that they purchased this thing from you? What does it do? You see what I'm saying? Like, is it security that they're purchasing? Is it marketing automation? Is it the ability to fundraise more effectively? Like, what is it that they're trying to accomplish where when you enter, they say, okay, this is the person that helps us reach that goal?
Well, those are the questions that I have to ask.
I mean, so what are all the different things that you provide, or your company provides, I guess I should say? Is it general service IT? Is it like a Salesforce cloud competitor?
That was more strategic planning where we're going to, say, for example, a nonprofit organization and try to evaluate them and find out how we can have better collaboration and come up with a strategic plan, what their goals and mission would be, and how we can help.
So you guys are IT strategy.
Yes.
Okay.
Strategy more than hardware. It's not that we do that, but that's only a small piece of it.
Okay. So then I feel like what you need to go forward with is really a strong strategic message of like, first of all, making IT understandable as a strategy component. So like an article I would expect to see from you would be like, why IT has to be a part of your strategic plan and 3 steps for how to include it. Because that lets people know, okay, IT is something that needs to be thought about strategically. IT for institutions that have financial documents or that have financial information for donors or clients. IT for institutions that have addresses. IT for institutions that, you see what I'm saying? Like why do I need an IT strategy? Because if people don't understand that portion, then the strength of your brand or how engaging you are, nothing else, it won't translate into sales. Like it'll translate into more connections, but those connections won't translate into sales until people understand what they're buying, right? And if you're, yeah. So I would double down on that. I I honestly would interview past clients, maybe not your clients because you're newer, but who are the senior people? Would they give you access to 25 clients that you can call and talk about, what made you purchase our product? What did you gain from it? What happened, first 3 months, first 6 months? Get all that information and then translate that into a way that makes sense for potential clients. And that will help you turn those contacts into actual sales.
And at the end of the day, content is still king. It is. It just is, and it always will be. I mean, the thing is, we have a flood of content, but a lot of that content is not valuable. It's just not. People think that, content is king. If I put out a lot of content, people are going to pay attention. Like, no, they're not, because they don't care. Like half of the stuff that people put out is just not great. It's just it's boring. It's not relevant. If you want to build thought leadership, build thought leadership. People don't care about, this, that, whatever. They care about understanding why you are qualified and what makes you different. Right? Like, why should I pay attention to you? What makes you share worthy? What makes you, what makes you helpful, right? So creating consistent content is a perfectly valid strategy as long as that content is valuable. And it doesn't take a lot of energy. It's just about discipline and consistency, right? It's the same thing with like I say with fitness, right? If friends say, how do you get in good shape? Well, you work out for 30 minutes a day and eat right. But it has to be something harder than, no, you can't not do it. Or you can't choose to go to, Louisiana Kitchen or Popeyes or like McDonald's or whatever, because when you're not disciplined and consistent, results don't happen. But it's the same thing with marketing communication. If you're writing an article every 3 days about a relevant issue, even if it's a 200, 300 word article, just a tip sheet, people are going to start looking at you as a thought leader over time. It just takes time. One of the biggest misconceptions about hiring a PR firm is that a PR firm gives immediate results. That's not true. Public relations is an ongoing strategy. It demands a plan and consistency and discipline, just like anything else. Same thing with advertising. It doesn't matter the method or the medium. It's about the consistency and discipline that breeds success in whatever you're doing. So I think that you're really smart in wanting to create a strategy and build a brand, but just understand that it takes time, and it's really just about consistency, and it needs to be good. Like, nobody wants to do, consistent garbage, like.
All right, suppose you want to change your audience. You're looking at something where your current audience is aging. You have all the bits and pieces that millennials want, but how do I sit there and translate grandma's product into a millennial product?
So we definitely need more context there.
Okay, I've worked in the craft industry, the art and design industry for over 30 years.
Okay.
All right, you go to a craft show, it's gray hair. The artists themselves a lot of them are gray, but a lot of them are fresh out of school. But here's a product that is environmentally friendly. Here's a product that is made in America. Here's a product that is all about, I'm going to mangle the word hygiene, where it's about making you feel good, all right? Here is all of these bits and pieces that the millennials have been talking about. How do I bring their money in? How do I take it from, here are the white-haired grandmas, all right, but this is where you should be. You should be here because here's something that will do for you, unlike any other unlike walking into Target. Yes, you're going to pay more for it. It's a luxury item.
Yeah.
But it's an item that can be tailored for you and for you.
So why would you be at a craft show?
Why would I be there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why not? You need to be at a music festival.
Okay.
Like is it, you got to go where the attention is. It's that simple. Like
That's just it.
Yeah.
How do I? But my focus right now is how do I get people to see this industry, because it is an industry. All right, for home and design, for home and personal design. All right, how do I bring in that audience? How do I go and say, look, everything you want is right here?
So
I just have a question, and I'm gonna
Go
let you
for
go.
it.
I'm gonna let you go. Sorry. So, are you? I just need one more point of clarification. Are you trying to get people to buy a product, or are you trying to get them to change to an industry?
But I want them to buy a product, yes, but I also want them to take a look at this industry as not for grandma.
Okay.
It's for you.
So there's going to be two parts to that. One part is going to be internal business structure, because right now the fact that you're at a craft show and probably a lot of other things you're doing show that your company is set up in a way that still serves grandma, right? So if your company is still set up to serve a certain audience, people aren't going to transfer yet because it's not serving them, right? Like, for example, do you have a subscription box?
No.
So that might be something that you want to do. It makes it a little bit easier for younger people, for people on the go, to know that they're always getting something that they can use and do crafts with. And then you also have to think about, what does this younger audience want to accomplish, right? Because the reasoning is different. Even if the product you're saying is applicable to both communities, the reasoning behind it could be very different, and you have to speak to the reason. Like, are you saying that this is a great product for self-care for busy professionals that need to do something with their hands during lunch? Is it something that people do at home? Is this something for gifts? Is this something that people can use to set up an
I'm not talking
Epson?
about people making it. I'm talking about people buying. I'm not looking for people, I'm not selling sewing kits, I'm not selling
Okay.
whatever. I'm selling items that have been handcrafted by somebody who's incredibly well educated and experienced.
Okay.
All right, and saying, why are you going to Tiffany's for this mass-produced thing where you can't even decide what stones you'd like, as opposed to going to see this artist over here, and he'll make sure that the ring fits your finger, and, oh, you don't like diamonds, you like rubies, he'll put a ruby in it. He'll put a garnet in it, he'll put whatever you're looking for.
So there's two things that you're going to have to understand for this perspective. First of all, millennials are way poorer than earlier generations. So sometimes, like when it comes to making a really expensive decision, millennials are going to scrutinize it way harder than earlier generations, because we have less disposable income and probably way more student loan debt. So when you talk about purchasing something expensive or something artisan or something unique, it's going to be, in our minds, a much less frequent purchase, and a purchase that we can't go back on or change or shift or anything like that. So you have to make it feel worthwhile within that context. And then the second thing is, how easy is it, right? Is it simple? Is it easy? Does it feel comfortable? Does it feel like I can easily customize it? Because while I understand your perspective that this isn't happening a lot, I also know that Etsy is a huge thing, and it's basically exactly what you're talking about. So I know that millennials are doing it. I know that there's young people doing it. I know there's a culture, like, you know, Detroit is regrowing massively based around this culture of like highly customized goods. So I know it's happening. It just might not be happening around the industries that you're connected to. And my guess is that those industries need to adjust to the way millennials are doing it, not the other way around.
And yeah, exactly. That's a really important thing, because it sounds like, and I could be incorrect in how I'm understanding what you're talking about, but it sounds like you're trying to get people to change their opinion and idea about an industry, which is not going to happen. Like your industry needs to adapt to their tastes and preferences. Like the likelihood of millennials or Gen Z or whatever deciding that they like craft shows is like saying that they're going to start reading newspapers. Like it's just not going to happen. Like the reality is, generational preferences are going to shift the market. The market is not going to shift generational preferences. So if you want to bring people into these festivals or these craft shows, what you need to do is change the definition of what that means. It needs to become a more experiential, something more experiential. You know, you need to be, instead, like I said, instead of being in a craft barn, you need to be at a music festival. I mean, you need to go where your attention is and where your audience is, because at the end of the day, you are not going to shift their preferences. It's not going to happen. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to create a massive preference shift, you better have billions and billions and billions of dollars to spend for disrupting, you know, how this is perceived and everything. Because at the end of the day, it's a lot easier to just go to where your audience is, you know, because it's like he said, Etsy. Etsy is essentially a craft show online. you know? Your vendors, and again, I'm not completely clear on exactly what you're talking about in terms of the business, but your vendors should be on Etsy, and they should be, like I said, they should be in music festivals, on Instagram. They should, yeah, like it's because at the end of the day, you're not going to get millennials coming in through a craft barn. I mean, maybe some weird ones, but you know, at the end of the day, they're not going to come in droves.
All right, so I think we have time for one last question, and then we'll still hang out. So if people have questions after, feel free to come up.
So it's like an onion of a question, there's like layers to it.
Okay.
I'll keep it quick. So we're a video production company, so we make content for other companies.
Yep.
And our products are fantastic and we want to share it with other people. But how do we like do it in a way that we're promoting ourselves and not necessarily promoting the school that, do you know what I'm saying? And like also telling our vendor, like future clients, like where to start with video, because video can be very daunting. So like, what's your tips for that?
I mean, so I was in the exact same situation not long ago, so I definitely feel exactly where you are. So some of the things that I've done are I created a, I don't want to say an app, but like an online tool that allowed people to storyboard out videos. And just kind of create a lightweight example, because I found that that was often a really difficult part. And also, you know, people always, this is normally how video stuff goes, right? Someone says, hey, we need a video done. And you say, okay, great, you know, we've got to develop a script, we've got to do this, we've got to find locations. And they're like, no, just come down and we'll shoot it. And you're like, that is a terrible idea. Your video's going to suck, and you're not going to be happy with it, and you're going to be mad at us. Like, oh, can you edit it differently? And it's like, no, this is what we shot. So creating something that helps them think through the actual steps while actually putting out their content could be really great for you. If it could be something like a quiz type of product or something that collects their contact information, maybe helps you in the qualification process, that could be really amazing. And also, people respect you more when they have to do work to talk to you. So creating something that's a barrier, like, oh yeah, you want to chat with us, that's great, fill this out, and then we'll, like something like that, after they go through it, first of all, you know they're qualified and they're serious. And second of all, it gives them a feeling that you guys are really professional and know what you're talking about, which is super valuable. In terms of content, I mean, depending on your contract structure, that could be easier or harder. Some of the things that I've done are like done slightly cheaper work for like producer credits or different things like that, just so that the name could be out there a little bit. You might want to, like if you've worked with, let's say you're working with a marketing firm that always needs content, or internal marketing team, to see if you could get your logo on their website as like a strategic partner or something like that could be really valuable, because then you just point to that, right? You say, we're the main partner for the Bach building. And then you have something on Bach's website that says Arsenal Media, our main partner for XYZ things. It could be a really good way to show people that you're legitimate, that you're working with them, because you can't always show the video and be like, this is our video, right? Like many times there's contract issues around that, especially if you're subcontracting with a marketing firm that wants to act like they have all the capability in-house. And then creating reels. Like you can almost always chop up your footage into a reel and like maintain the full rights to that. So I would definitely do, 2016 Q1 reel, 2017 Q3 reel, whatever it is. Show people like this is what our footage looks like, different situations. Make that really easy. I would attach the links to your reels as well as different footage links to every person that speaks outwardly on your team. I would have it be in their email signatures, so that whatever you're sending out, whoever you're talking to, they can always see reels, they can always get an easy link to content. And maybe even doing something like a newsletter. It's a little bit of an old school tactic, but if you already have these people's contact information, if you can send them information about what you're working on, what you're doing, how it's being used, that's great. And then when you work with partners, get numbers. Get as many numbers as possible. How many people viewed the thing? How was it used? Did it increase profitability? Did it increase conversion metrics, whatever else, and put that stuff on your website, because people don't understand video as a product on its own. It feels very expensive and very difficult to do, but they understand a 30% increase in conversion for all of their ads. And that feels valuable, and that feels like something that they'll go out and do.
Now this is like not really even serious, but I just want to say it. But I would create a reality show. Yeah. I think that'd be fun. That's fun.
And you could easily do that with something like,
Yeah.
exactly.
I was like, no way.
Exactly.
I would create a reality show. Everyone wants to work with somebody on a reality show. But just like arguing too, just like getting in dramatic fights, like screaming at each other, like people love that. People love
But
that.
also behind the scenes content can be
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
We have like thought about like doing some like funny behind the scenes.
You should.
So.
You should.
But
People
even
pay
if
attention
it's
to
not
that.
funny, if people see what the process is, because I think everyone imagines that you're going to show up with a camera and a light and it's going to be cool and they're going to stand there. So if they see you like spending 45 minutes setting up a shoot, they're going to respect it more. You see what I'm saying? If they see you with 3 different cameras and like somebody, because I mean it's video, right? Inevitably there's going to be someone on a ladder hanging like this with a camera trying to look at the angle, going, camera 4 ready, camera 3, like it's going to happen. So if you get that behind the scenes footage of like, wow, these people go above and beyond, it'll help people feel more comfortable, especially with the cost, but also with the professionalism of your team.
People always ask in our video how you guys made the book levitate.
Yep. Special
To show
effects
that
behind
how
the
you guys
scenes.
did
Yeah.
that. Killer. That'd be killer.
Yep. All right, thank you.
Thank you guys for your
Great
time.
job.
Yeah. Thank you.